Every day? Alright, we'll go back to one of these because these things are interesting.
Boring.
I watched the first minute. Okay.
You know, everybody wants to talk about equality, but you know, there's breast enlargement. What about penis enlargement? Not pills, but just like surgery.
There is. You know what they do is like every man has like 3 or 4 inches of dick that's like in their body, and they just pull the rest of it out.
Really? So what you're saying is, you guys know
if I pull hard enough.
What the
I've never heard you guys get more excited about something in your entire lives.
Can you tell we all have small penises? We're not trying to be average out here.
3 to 4 inches. Is that true?
Damn, I ain't even got 3 inches right now. Shit. You mean I got more inside me than outside? Shit, girl, you want a dick pic? You don't need to take an X-ray.
Holy fuck.
Jesus Christ.
You just send her an X-ray. My dick is a fucking iceberg.
Dude, that's actually fucking great. Oh
hey guys, this video
that's actually fucking hilarious. That is great, dude.
Visited all the remote islands, conquered the Arctic, and penetrated the deepest jungles. But there is still one place to explore.
Yeah, if you just pull hard enough, guys, you
desert
get a longer dick. There you go. That's what we learned today.
Living in total darkness. The deep sea. Let's dive down.
I'm gonna try it. Be right back. All right, let's know how it goes.
When we look at the sheer scale of the Earth's oceans, it's hard to believe that less than 2% of all biomass on Earth lives here. And of that small percentage, around 90% is located close to the surface in the first 200 meters.
So what's below, dude?
This is where we begin our journey.
I do.
Gotta
try this.
Which allows photosynthesis to occur.
Alright, we need to need some test subjects. Yeah, thanks for following. Welcome to the stream. It worked. Holy shit!
Consumed by bigger plankton who are
join the stream at the best time. That was actually like the funniest thing I've seen all day, dude.
The sea floor at this depth is akin to the Amazon rainforest and is often covered with coral reefs, algae, and other sea plants that are home to a plethora
Mom
of
is visiting
animals.
and wants to live with me for a week.
So
I'm ready to
we
commit.
focused
So
most of our attention on this comparatively pleasant environment
hey man,
where we fish, swim,
at least the moms will make
and do science.
good food, right?
So,
Like, hey, so if you're coming, you
moving from familiar
make some
coastal
bomb-ass
waters
food,
into
and then maybe
deeper,
it's
more
worth.
remote waters, we eventually reach the edge of the Continental Shelf, where we're confronted with the Continental Slope, the long descent down to the deep sea. With every additional meter of water, light fades drastically, which means there are basically no more plants, and the seemingly steep Continental Slope begins to remind us of the surface of the moon. Looking out, we're faced by what seems to be endless open water. Let's leave the slope behind us and enter what's known as the Twilight Zone, the portal to the deep sea. As we sink down further, the water pressure rises to deadly levels. The deepest scuba dive ever came in at 332 meters. At that depth, the pressure is like having 200 cars stacked on top of you.
How did that guy survive
We've
that?
only completed 3% of our journey.
Shit.
While this region seems pretty grim, many fish and other animals actually spend at least half their lives down here. During the day, it's a good place to rest and recover, hidden from predators in the vast, dark waters. At night, they can travel more safely into shallower zones to feed in the food-rich surface waters. In this transition zone between twilight and
giant
darkness,
squids and
light
jellyfish
becomes a powerful tool. Over 90% of the species indigenous to this deep environment use bioluminescence chemicals to create light. They do so as camouflage against the very faint sunlight, to send signals to potential mates, or to confuse and scare attackers. Or they use light to hunt.
Oh, dude, that guy.
Another tool
it's like an anglerfish or something. I remember that.
At around 700 meters, we encounter a colony of siphonophores. They can be up to 50 meters in length, but are only as wide as a broomstick.
Whoa,
to attract prey, A colony creates a tragically beautiful bright blue or red light and deploys a curtain of tentacles filled with toxic needles that kill anything that comes too close. But most species living down here have to rely on an unlikely resource, marine snow. White, flaky stuff that constantly sinks from the surface to the bottom of the ocean.
All the carcasses.
It consists of dead plant or animal parts, fecal matter, shells, sand, or dust. Even though this doesn't sound very tasty, without this crucial resource, life in the deep sea would starve. It's in this area that the most fascinating battles between two unlikely enemies could happen.
Oh.
Sperm whales hunt and attack giant squid the size of a house.
Oh shit.
While the squid fight back ferociously, they probably don't stand a chance, but they do leave permanent marks on their killer's skin. As we reach 1,000 meters, deeper than the tallest structure built by humans, we need to be careful. This is the Midnight Zone.
The Midnight Zone.
A place of utter darkness. A barely explored
What's the farthest?
Consisting of nothing but endless.
Somebody has gone in like one of these like ships.
At these depths, it's harder for a human to take a swim than to take a walk in space. Finding food down here is really hard, so life had to adapt and
I guess they'll
become
tell us in this video probably.
energy efficient. Like the 30-centimeter long vampire squid that floats through the water without motion, with long and slender catching arms extended.
Oh.
They're covered in tiny, stiff hairs which brush food from the water. This saves a lot of energy compared to actively catching food. For carnivorous fish, it's much harder to find food since living prey is quite rare down here.
Looks so ugly.
So the hunters have to get a perfect grip on their victim on first strike, otherwise it will escape into the dark.
Oh.
Many deep-sea predators have several sets of long and deadly teeth. Like the viperfish, which uses its long fangs to trap even large prey and swallow it whole. Or the frilled shark with its impressive set of 300
I went to
teeth,
sip my coffee and I missed my mouth.
to hook their victims
Oh
in their
no.
mouths. We sink further, below the 3,800 mark, as deep as the grave of the Titanic. We are now at abyssal depths.
Abyssal
Here,
Plain.
life happens in slow motion.
Slow-mo?
Preserving every last bit of energy is crucial for survival. Everything down here hovers motionless or swims in a slow, elegant fashion. The only time the animals living in this zone move fast is when they have to escape danger. Like the Dumbo octopod paddling with its ear-like fins, or the grenadier's fish with its slow, eel-like tail beats. At 4,000 meters, we finally reach ground again, the Abyssal Plain. It's covered in grey mud and rocks, dusted with the remains of marine snow, which is consumed by animals like sea cucumbers, shrimp, sea urchins, and sea worms.
Shrimp
In
can go
some
down that
regions
far?
of the seafloor, small, dark mineral deposits can be seen. These are manganese nodules. Deep-sea corals and sponges use them to anchor themselves on the bottom of the sea. Though life is sparse on the deep seafloor,
Wonder how long it
even
would take to
down
get to the
here,
bottom,
there
yeah.
are oases. In the rift valleys, where tectonic plates are splitting apart, magma heats up seawater and creates dark jets of water and minerals as hot as 400 degrees Celsius that form elaborate chimneys and towers.
Oh shit, get nice and warm, dude.
Extremophile bacteria use
A
the
nice warm
minerals to
bath.
create organic substances that are the basis for unique ecosystems. As we descend further, we reach the deepest point of the Abyssal Plain at 6,000 meters. For most of the seafloor, this is as deep as it gets. But if we want to get to the deepest point of the oceans, we're actually only halfway there.
Only halfway?
Let's enter the Hadal Zone, the underworld of the sea.
Oh shit.
It consists of long, narrow trenches that only make up around 0.25% of the oceans and are
Bro,
among
this
the
is
most
where,
extreme environments on Earth.
Fuck, Pacific Rim, dude, all the monsters hide.
Extremophiles exist down here, like the ethereal snailfish that holds the
What's the
record
name of
for
the video?
deepest living
What's
fish
hiding
ever
at the
seen
most
at around 8,000
solitary
meters.
place of, or
We
on
see
Earth?
spiky and sharp black rocks
deep
rush
sea.
by as we sink down to more than 10,000. Until we reach the final slope, a trench inside the larger Mariana Trench with gently sloping sides that enframe a valley about 1.6 kilometers wide.
Is anything living there though?
This is it, the deepest point, the Challenger Deep.
Challenger deep.
11,000 meters below the surface. The water pressure here is 1,086 bar. Taking a swim here is like having to balance 1,800 elephants on top of you. But even here, life has found a way to thrive.
What?
Next to sea cucumbers, white and light pink amphipods wiggle their way through the water. Their size is astounding. While their shallow water cousins are merely a few centimeters long, the deep sea version can reach up to 30 centimeters.
Oh shit. Big boys.
And there are other things floating elegantly through the water. Plastic bags that were found by scientists in 2018. Even the remotest place on Earth is not safe from human influence.
What? There's plastic bags down there?
There's nothing left to do now, and our oxygen is running out, so we begin our ascent.
That sucks. Educational stream, Pugyu, I know, right?
After hours of traveling through dark nothingness, we finally see a glimpse of light. We arrive back at a calm surface. The oceans are so deep. There is so much of
Yeah, I haven't either.
We owe it to ourselves and to our descendants to preserve them as well as we can. There are still so many wondrous things left to be discovered.
Wow. Wonders things to be discovered.
So, you're all tingly now and want to go exploring.
Yeah, dude, let's go
Why
exploring.
not start off with some juicy science? You can use our friends from Brilliant as your springboard for an...
Oh my god, really? We go... Building a Mars base? Hell yeah, dude.
From hostile deserts to lonely islands and the highest
Let's
mountains,
build a Mars base.
wherever there is space to expand into, humans do so. So it's hardly surprising that we're already making preparations to set foot on Mars and to create the first permanent colony outside of Earth, maybe even terraform another planet and turn it into a second blue home. But wait, before we can get to the nice future stuff, we first have to complete
watch
the
any
second phase of colonization.
AGDQ?
creating a
What's that? I have
semi-permanent
not.
outpost to prepare the ground for a larger human presence. But doing so will be gruesome. Even for an expansionist species like us, Mars is extreme. At first glance, Mars seems familiar. Polar ice caps, large valleys, liquid water under its surface, and a day barely longer than Earth's. The ideal place
Hell
for
yeah.
us to go.
Let's go to Mars.
Unfortunately, Mars is actually a cold, radioactive desert where the ground is poisonous and breathing is impossible. Mars
so we long
is
speedrunning event?
awful.
Oh, shit.
You almost certainly don't want to go
Oh, is that where
there.
they sped run
The
that like
pioneers doing the
super
hard
jump
work
game
on
in like
Mars will have
fucking
an
8 minutes or
intensely
something?
stressful
And
life
people take
filled
like
with
weeks
incredibly
to do it?
challenging problems never encountered before. But there are plenty of people willing to do that work, and we have the technology to enable them to do it. For this video, we will assume there have been prior missions to Mars to scout out a good place for an outpost, store resources and equipment, and that there's already a moon base that serves as a hub for Mars missions. The first major challenge for our outpost is the fact that Mars is very energy poor. Because of its distance from the Sun, solar power is only 40% as effective as on Earth.
Oh.
But even this weakened sunlight is often obscured for days by enormous dust storms. Solar power alone will probably not be enough. Alternatives such as wind power and geothermal energy are also unfeasible, as there's hardly any atmosphere and Mars's interior is much too cold.
Oh, what do you do?
Initially, nuclear technology might be the only option.
Oh.
Since Mars doesn't have easily accessible radioactive elements,
Bro,
the nuclear fuel needs to come from Earth along with the reactor.
If it's
we do
nuclear,
set it
isn't that
up,
the chance
it
for it
could
to like
power our
explode?
small outpost
So you're
for the
just
first
chilling
few
at a
years.
fucking Mars base and all of a
Unfortunately,
sudden
all that energy won't be very
fucking
useful
the
if
nuclear
we
thing just
can't
goes off.
breathe. Mars's atmosphere is only 1% as dense as Earth's and mostly made up of CO2. So our habitats need to be pressurized and filled with an artificial atmosphere made of nitrogen and oxygen, which comes with more problems. Corners and flat walls are weak points, so the habitats will have rounded and smooth shapes to handle the stress of great pressure differences between the interior and exterior. The airlocks need to be very airtight and work perfectly every time. Without an extensive magnetosphere or a dense atmosphere, half of
This is
all
a lot of shit that
radiation
needs to
coming
go
from
right
space reaches
to
the
colonize
ground.
Mars. What the
A
fuck?
person on the surface would be subjected to 50 times the radiation that they would be on Earth. 3 years on the surface of Mars exceeds the radiation dose limits imposed on NASA astronauts for their entire career.
Oh shit.
This increases cancer risks significantly. To prevent that, we could shield our habitats with a thick layer of frozen CO2 that can be harvested directly from the atmosphere. Covering the dry ice with a meter of dirt would further increase the level of protection. Sadly, this means almost no windows. From the inside, most living spaces will be windowless tunnels. From the outside, they'll look like burial mounds. All of this would still
So we
not
just live
hold back
underground
all the
then?
radiation, but reduce it just enough to be survivable for long periods of time.
Nuclear's gotten more
It won't,
safe lately.
however,
Oh,
protect
okay.
anyone who ventures outside.
Except from employee.
So remote
special
controlled
social-
robots
negligence?
will be
Okay.
used for routine work on the surface while our crew stays inside. Staying inside is a good idea for another reason: Mars dust. It's much
shit.
finer than dust on Earth, so it could find its way into the gears or electronics of our machines. Because it's also very dry, it's electrostatically charged, sticking to everything, like spacesuits. It would be impossible to avoid carrying lots of Mars dust into our habitat and into the lungs of our crew.
Oh, we don't
To
want
make
that.
this even worse, Mars's soil is filled with very toxic perchlorate salts. Constant exposure could be deadly. This problem can still be overcome though. Spacesuits, for example, could be made in a way that they never truly enter the base, but stay attached to the outside of the habitats. Okay, great.
That's
Now
pretty
we've
big brain.
safely isolated humans in terms of energy and air, and protected them from cancer. We just need to feed them. Water is easy to come by if a settlement is positioned near the Martian poles with their thick layers of ice. Growing food is a different kind of challenge, though. Mars'
how do we grow the
soils
food?
are alkaline and lack the vital nitrogen compounds that plants need to grow.
Fuck.
Before we can grow anything, we will have to decontaminate the soil, which is difficult and expensive. Then the soil can be fertilized using recycled biological waste.
Oh shit, it's like
All of
the
this will take a lot of time
fuck,
and
what's
is
the-
very
what's that movie?
energy-intensive. So we might use
With Matt
aquaponics to
Damon?
raise fish and
He's the
plants
botanist
together,
guy?
making the astronauts' diets more varied and tasty at the same time. This will be an important psychological
no,
boost
it's
for
like
our
he did
overworked
that. He
crew.
like made it his own.
All of these
like,
things don't
food and
solve
shit
one
on- it was,
fundamental
like,
problem
on
though.
Mars.
Mars has only 38% of Earth's
Yeah,
surface
yeah,
gravity,
exactly.
which could cause muscle wasting, bone loss, and cardiovascular problems.
Uh-oh.
While
Not
this
good.
might be solved in the future by setting up rotating living spaces, for now our crew has to live with low gravity and exercise a lot to slow the degradation down. The crews will probably have to rotate every few years. After being stuck indoors in tight spaces without windows, with the same people, performing the same routines day in, day out, with little contact from the outside world, and a lot to worry about. Like Antarctic scientists or submarine staff, they will undergo intense psychological screening to make sure they're mentally resilient enough to handle this lifestyle for several years. Establishing the first real infrastructure on Mars
Bro,
will
that
be
sucked.
extremely taxing work that
Yeah.
only a group of very determined and competent people can do. Luckily, we have enough of these on Earth.
Hell yeah.
And there you have it, a small Mars base that will survive for at least a few decades, as long as it's getting a constant supply of resources, parts, nuclear fuel, and crews from Earth. Unfortunately, Mars and Earth are separated by millions of kilometers and orbital periods that leave only a narrow travel window every 2 years. If there's an emergency in the colony, Earth wouldn't be able to help until the next travel window opens.
Oh shit, 2 years?
Helpers may arrive on a planet filled with corpses.
Oh.
Settling Mars will be the toughest challenge we have ever faced. It will be gruesome work to establish the infrastructure we need. But we're stubborn, and we like extreme challenges.
Hell yeah.
If we push through phase 2 of colonization, anything is possible. Cities illuminating the dark Martian night, a hub for travel between the planets, industries setting foot in orbit.
I believe, dude.
terraforming,
Let's get
a
it.
true multi-planetary future. Going to Mars is hard, but worth it. And if we're lucky, we might be around long enough to
How do you
see it
motivate
happening
yourself to
and
train
cheer on the people who take
you were
on
getting
these
good?
challenges for the benefit of us all.
That's just like a self thing. Like,
Figuring out complex stuff is
I've always
one
wanted
of
to be like the
best
best in
feelings
everything
ever,
I've done.
especially if you don't have
So,
to
like,
do it all by yourself. Our friends from Brilliant can
I was
help
just
you
like,
out
I
with
don't know, I
that
just
part.
wanted to
Brilliant.
get better so I could try and go pro. That was like the biggest thing. So long as you just be like, hey, dude, it's like you have to like ask yourself like, why are you playing the game? Like why you want to do this? And if it's just for fun, then you don't really need to like, you know, hard grind to fucking like get good. If you're just like wanting to have fun, if you want to have fun and like actually get really good at the game, then you have to put the effort in. Like, okay, let's just like watch a video. Let's like do like the VODs, like watch pro play and stuff like that. Doing aim training of like Kovacs, bro, just play
dream about
Overwatch.
leaving Earth and traveling through the galaxy. But we were born too early to be part of it. Or were we? The reality is, we could begin our dream by building a moon base today.
Let's build a moon
We
base.
actually do have the technology, and current estimates from NASA and the private sector say it could be done for
What's
$20
Overwatch
to
nowadays? The
$40
same
billion
exact thing, double
spread out
shield.
over about a decade. The price is comparable to the International Space Station or the budget surplus of Germany in 2017. Not that big an investment, really. The payoff would be immeasurable. The moon is a sandbox to develop new technologies and exploit unlimited resources. It would start a new space race and lay the foundation for us to spread out into the solar system and beyond. It would create a vast array of new technologies to benefit us on Earth, and we would all be part of it.
Hell
So,
yeah.
why aren't we doing it?
Why aren't we doing it?
Well, sadly, it's hard to get governments interested in long-term investments in the future of humanity.
Why not?
Let's imagine just doing it. If we
Just
start
do it.
today, how would we build a moon base?
If I want to die, I have a year of goats. Versus shields, yeah. Now they're trying to implement 1-3-2, so it's only one tank, 3 DPS, and 2 supports. That's what they're like
Throughout
play test.
history,
Like I guess they've been
colonization
play testing
happened
for a
in
little bit.
phases.
So it's gonna change 2-2-2
In the
into
first phase of
1-3-2,
the age of exploration of the New World, for example, European
which makes it even
monarchs
less of a meta
funded
because
expeditions to
only you
chart
can play
and
one
discover
tank.
and to stake their claims.
But
They planted a flag and set up a camp, but they didn't stay. In the second phase, small missions set up outposts and settlements were founded, which were still very dependent on their home countries for supplies. Some failed, but others survived and established a permanent presence. Only then, in the third phase, did a true colony form to which tradesmen and laborers could emigrate, creating new wealth and opportunities
Okay,
for
easy,
themselves
3
and their
phases.
families, sending extreme wealth back to their countries
these
of
divers
origin.
gonna be back. I mean, only Hammond.
When we colonize
But
the moon,
it's not even really gonna
we'll
be
go
like-
through the same 3 phases.
It's gonna be like
This
Hammond,
time,
Farah,
without murdering
Tracer,
millions of innocent people
and then
in the
like
process.
Soldier or Widow probably.
The moon is not a welcoming place for living things.
But yeah,
a moon day lasts
technically it would be like
29 Earth days,
dive.
with a difference of
You just
nearly
dive off fire
300 degrees
directs.
Celsius between sunlight and shade.
We're running for your life
There's
on
no
Hammond
atmosphere to
because your
shield
ass is
us
gonna
from
get hacked or some
meteorites,
shit.
big and small, or cosmic radiation. Worse still, the lunar surface is covered in a layer of nasty, jagged dust. The moon is hard, but we're good at doing hard things.
Yeah.
In the first
good.
phase of lunar colonization, our explorers proved it can be done, that a new world can be reached. This phase started
Yeah, dude, we did
60
that
years ago
fucking
with the
long ass
Apollo
time
missions.
ago too.
Since then, satellites like the American Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter have mapped the moon, while rovers like the Chinese U2 have studied the composition of the lunar surface, looking for water ice and metals. Phase 1 is more or less complete. We know what we need to know to enter Phase 2. In the second phase, astronauts will build the first moon base, and this could begin today.
Come on, astronauts, I
The
believe.
first small moon base could be completed in a decade. The first nation that establishes this base will be akin to the First Nations building outposts in the New World 500 years ago. It's expensive to send rockets to the moon, so we will send as
Really,
little
Jeff, we
as
didn't
possible.
consider removing
The
a tank
base will
roll?
be light, little more than
Yeah, that's
inflatable
Overwatch for
habitats
you.
for crews of no more than 12, and will be deployed somewhere with natural shelter. Options include caves,
With the
like
guy on
underground
Debug
lava
said we were
tube
at
tunnels,
comp or
or
comp with
craters
Ryan
near the
Reaper John
poles,
more
where the days are 6 months long.
Yeah, sounds about right.
These astronauts
Watch
will
people
not
are
stay
smart.
long. The habitat is likely to be abandoned between missions, as solar panels cannot generate electricity during the lunar night. But they'll do the groundwork to enable humans to stay permanently. Our first crew will consist of scientists and engineers who will study the composition of the moon and whose experiments will explore ways of using the available lunar material, say purifying lunar ice and turning it into water for human use. And water is important for far more than drinking.
Yes,
They
we need
can
the
use
water.
it to experiment with growing plants for food. Hydrogen fuel cells will store power through the long night, extending astronaut stays. And most importantly, it can be split into hydrogen and oxygen, rocket fuel.
Oh,
By
yep. We need
harvesting
we
water
need that
from the
rocket
moon
fuel.
and putting it into orbit, the moon base will supply an orbital depot where scientific missions to Mars and the outer solar system can refuel. Compared to the Earth, it's much easier and cheaper to get things off the moon into orbit. Colonizing Mars may mean starting from the moon. But this isn't a true colony, not yet. The base will be abandoned if funding stops. If we want our base to grow into the third phase, into a true colony, it must become self-sufficient, supporting itself via exports to Earth.
Ooh.
Now, private contractors arrive, looking to get rich off lunar resources and support services.
Hell
If
yeah,
it's cheaper
Elon
to
Musk,
produce
dude.
rocket fuel in
He's getting
space,
ready to
what
colonize.
else can they get rich on? They could extract precious metals, abundant in impact craters, and other raw materials from the lunar
because like it
regolith.
matters, yeah.
One
That's how
promising
war should be
possibility
played.
is the mining of helium-3, an isotope that could one day be used in nuclear fusion reactors, something the Chinese lunar exploration program is currently looking into. Future colonists may export helium-3 back to Earth, providing us with cheap and clean fusion energy. Asteroids
Wow,
can be
cheap and
pulled into the
clean.
moon's orbit and mined. With commercial exports to Earth, the colony is fully in its third phase, self-sufficient and economically productive.
Hell yeah.
Our base will begin using lunar material in its construction projects if it's to continue growing. Fortunately, lunar soil has all the necessary ingredients to make concrete. Robotic mining rigs can sift the lunar dust for organic molecules and could be used to build huge structures way too massive to be brought from Earth, while advances in 3D printing will make it possible to produce almost everything
Oh
else
shit,
the
dude, we can make
crews need.
droids with 3D printing? Hell yeah.
It's hard to say when exactly the colony becomes self-sustaining. Growth is gradual, experiments are replaced by industry, and the population steadily reaches the hundreds, encompassing more than just scientists. Engineers, pilots, and contractors representing countries and corporations will be present. Two of these people will make a breakthrough. Not scientific, but social. They will have the first extraterrestrial child.
Oh
Throughout history, the birth of the first child was celebrated as a moment where the seed of a colony finally and irreversibly took root. Here,
Who wants to
it
do
means
that?
the moon is not just
Who's
a
gonna have
place
the
for
first kid?
scientists and engineers to work, it's a place for people to live, to raise a family. Once this transition
What,
happens,
be-
the colony grows rapidly.
live in
building more
Elon country
habitats and
without hella
schools and
internet?
farms
Hell
and
yeah,
all
dude.
the things needed
Hell
to
yeah.
support the growing population. As our
Drive
colony
around some
grows,
Teslas,
all
dude. The
kinds of new
Cybertruck is
technologies will
literally
be
just
invented to sustain it.
a moon truck.
They might develop crops that efficiently recycle carbon dioxide or that grow with very little water. They might find ways to recycle and reuse 100% of their waste.
If you wanna live on Mars, you gotta be
technologies that are extremely
DTF, yeah.
valuable for Earth. They could even build the first space elevator in the solar system. With a space elevator, spacecraft, astronauts, and raw materials could be brought back and forth from lunar orbit without needing to use
Oh
rockets
shit,
at
an
all.
elevator.
The moon may become a hub for economic activity on a scale that's hard to imagine right now.
Oh hell yeah.
It's hard to say who will own the colony at this point. Will the first person born on the moon take the national identity of their parents, or will a new generation meld together into a new
United
lunar
States of
society?
Moon.
And when existing treaties that bar any nation from owning the moon are inevitably rewritten, will the colonists be given a say?
Oh.
Will they declare independence from the Earth?
Yeah, and
However it
they're gonna
happens,
blow up the
the
Earth.
moon is a perfect sandbox to learn how to colonize the solar system. The perfect
They're gonna
project
have
to unify
revolutionary
nations,
wars on the
and
moon,
the
bro.
only way to guarantee our survival as a species should something tragic happen on Earth. If we ever want to colonize the Milky Way, we'll have to start somewhere. So why not start there? Why not start now?
Let's start now, dude. gonna have my
While
baby on it.
unfortunately you can't jump on a spacecraft and go to the moon right now, you can learn more interesting things about space and our universe.
What language will they speak? True. English. Because that's like the most universal language, for sure. I think that's like the easiest one. It's not the easiest one to learn, but it's one that most people know. What other ones? Rise of the Machines. Hell yeah. Here we go. This will be the last
How
one,
long
and
do
then
you
we'll
think it will take
look at
before
other stuff.
machines do your job better than you do? Automation used to mean big, stupid machines doing repetitive work in factories. Today, they can land aircraft, diagnose cancer, and trade stocks. We are entering a new age of automation unlike anything that's come before. According to a 2013
I can just give a
study,
robot
almost half of
my
all
money,
jobs in
dude,
the
and
US
then
could
they do the
potentially be
stocks for me?
automated in
Holy
the next
shit.
2 decades. But wait, hasn't automation been around for decades? What's different this time?
We're making it so they can do flips.
Things used to be simple. Innovation made human work easier and productivity rose, which means that more stuff or services could be produced per hour using the same amount of human workers. This eliminated many jobs, but also created other jobs that were better, which was important because the growing population needed work. So, in a nutshell, innovation, higher productivity, fewer old jobs, and many new and often better jobs. Overall, this worked well for a majority of people and living standards improved. There's a clear progression in terms of what humans did for a living. For the longest time, we worked in agriculture. With the Industrial Revolution, this shifted to production jobs. And as automation became more widespread, humans shifted into service jobs. And then, only a few moments ago in human history, the Information Age happened. Suddenly, the rules were different. Our jobs are now being taken over by machines much faster.
So now we need to
than they
be
were in the
programmers.
past. That's worrying, of course, but innovation will clearly save us, right? While new information age industries are booming, they are creating fewer and fewer new jobs. In 1979, General Motors employed more than 800,000 workers and made about $11 billion US. In 2012, Google made about $14 billion US while employing 58,000 people. You may not like this comparison, but Google is an example of what created new jobs in the past. Innovative new industries. Old innovative industries are running out of steam. Just look at cars. When they became a thing 100 years ago, they created huge industries. Cars transformed our way of life, our infrastructure, and our cities.
That they did.
Millions of people found jobs either directly or indirectly. Decades of investment kept this momentum going. Today, this process is largely complete. Innovation in the car industry does not create as many jobs as it used to.
We need the flying cars,
While
bro.
electric
Let's start
cars
flying
are
around.
great and all, they won't create millions of new jobs. But wait, what about the internet? Some technologists argue that the internet is an innovation on a par with the introduction of electricity. If we go with this comparison, we see how our modern innovation differs from the old one. The internet created new industries, but they're not creating enough jobs to keep up with population growth or to compensate for the industries the internet is killing. At its peak in 2004, Blockbuster had
F's in the chat for
84,000 employees
Blockbuster,
and made
dude.
$6 billion US in revenue.
Feels
In 2016, Netflix
Yep,
had
Netflix,
4,500 employees and made $9 billion in revenue. Or take us, for example. With a full-time team of just 12 people, Kurzgesagt reaches millions of people. A TV station with the same amount of viewers needs way more employees. Innovation in the information age doesn't equate to the creation of enough new jobs, which would be bad enough on its own, but now a new wave of automation and a new generation of machines is slowly taking over.
So what do we do?
To understand this, we need to understand ourselves first. Human progress is based on the division of labor. As we advanced over thousands of years, our jobs became more and more specialized. While even our smartest machines are bad at doing complicated jobs, they are extremely good at doing narrowly defined and predictable tasks. This is what destroyed factory jobs. But look at a complex job long and hard enough, and you'll find that it's really just many narrowly defined and predictable tasks, one after another. Machines are on the brink of becoming so good at breaking down complex jobs into many predictable ones that for a lot of people, there will be no further room to specialize. We are on the verge of being out-competed.
So we just do nothing.
Digital machines do this.
We just
via machine learning,
buy a
which enables
robot
them
to
acquire
do a job
information
for
and
us
skills
while
by
we sit and play
analyzing
video
data.
games. Easy
This
clap.
makes them become better at something
There we
through
go.
the relationships they discover. Machines
Get paid
teach
for the machine's
themselves.
job.
We make this possible by giving a computer a lot of data about the thing we want it to become better at. Show a machine all the things you bought online,
Wall-E
and
future.
it will slowly learn what to recommend to you, so you buy more things. Machine learning is now meeting more of its potential because in recent years, humans have started to gather data about everything. Behavior, weather patterns, medical records, communication systems, travel data, and of course, data about what we do at work.
Oh shit.
What we've
Playing video
created
games
by
at work?
accident
Nah,
is
bro,
a
nobody ever do
huge
that.
library machines can use to learn how humans do things and learn to do them better. These digital machines might be the biggest job killer of all. They can be replicated instantly and for free. When they improve, you don't need to invest in big metal things, you can just use the new code. And they have the ability to get better fast. How
Hyper
fast?
mode. Oh
If your
shit.
work involves complex work on a computer today, you might be out of work even sooner than the people who still have jobs in factories. There are actual real-world examples of how this transition might be happening. A San Francisco company offers a project management software for big corporations which is supposed to eliminate middle management positions. When it's hired for a new project, the software first decides which jobs can be automated and precisely where it needs actual professional humans. It then helps assemble a team of freelancers over the internet. The software then distributes tasks to the humans and controls the quality of the work.
What the hell?
tracking
They've made
individual
this?
performance until the project is complete. Okay, this doesn't sound too bad. While this machine is killing one job, it creates jobs for freelancers, right? Well, as the freelancers complete their tasks, learning algorithms track them and gather data about their work and which tasks it consists of. So what's actually happening is that the freelancers are teaching a machine how to replace them. On average, this software
Get
reduces
fucked.
costs by about 50% in the first year and by another 25% in the second year. This is only one example of many. There are machines and programs getting as good or better than humans in all kinds of fields.
Oh shit, I gotta
From pharmacists
do with
to
metal
analysts,
boxing.
journalists to radiologists, cashiers, bank tellers, or the unskilled worker flipping burgers. All of these jobs won't disappear overnight, but fewer and fewer humans will be doing them. We'll discuss a few cases in a follow-up video. But while jobs disappearing is bad, it's only half of the story. It's
So what
not
do we
enough
do?
to substitute old jobs with new ones. We need to be generating new jobs constantly
Yes,
because
new
the world
jobs.
population is growing. In the past, we have solved this through innovation. But since 1973, the
The part is
generation
that
of new jobs in the
because
US
of
has begun to
automotive,
shrink.
the switch
And
automation
the
will be
first
inevitable.
decade
Oh
of
yeah,
the
dude.
21st century was the first one where the total
It'll
amount
always
of
happen.
jobs in the US did not grow for the first time. In a country that needs to create up to 150,000 new jobs per month just to keep up with population growth, this is bad news. This is also starting to affect standards of living. In the past, it was seen as obvious that with rising
10%
productivity,
of the workplace
more and
need
better
to be
jobs
human?
would be created. But the
Oh,
numbers
shit.
tell a different story. In 1998, US workers worked a total of 194 billion hours. Over the course of the next 15 years, their output increased by 42%. But in 2013, the amount of hours worked by US workers was still 194 billion hours. What this means is that despite productivity growing drastically, thousands of new businesses opening up, and the US population growing by over 40 million, there was no growth at all in the number of hours worked in 15 years. At the same time, wages for new university graduates in the US have been declining for the past decade, while up to 40% of new graduates are forced to take on jobs that don't require a degree.
Oh. Rip.
Productivity is separating from human labor. The nature of
Fast
innovation in the
food places are
information
using
age is
machines to
different
take
from
orders. Yeah,
everything
dude,
we
like
encountered
McDonald's.
before. This process started years ago and
So
is already
they have
well
less like human
underway,
employees on the registers.
even without new disruptions like self-driving cars or robot accountants. It looks like automation is different this time. This time, the machines might really take our jobs. Our economies are based on the premise that people consume. But if fewer and fewer people have decent work, who will be doing all the consuming? Are we producing ever more cheaply only to arrive at a point where too few people can actually buy all our stuff and services? Or will the future see a tiny minority of the super rich who own the machines dominating the rest of us? And does our future really have to be that grim? While we were fairly dark in this video, it's far from certain that things will turn out negatively. The information age and modern automation could be a huge opportunity to change human society and reduce poverty and inequality drastically. It could be a seminal moment in human history. We'll talk about this
Only
potential
time
and
will
possible
tell, right?
solutions like a universal basic income in part 2 of this video series. We need to think big and fast, because one thing's for sure, the machines are not coming, they are already here.
They're already here, dude.
This video took us about 900 hours to make, and we've been working on it for over 9 months.
900
Projects
hours?
like this one would not be possible without your support on
What the heck?
Patreon.
That's a lot of time. It's a good video though.